Welcome back to Reddit Untold, where the pettiest revenge and the most satisfying payback stories on the entire internet come to life. I have got a whole stack of them for you today, the kind where someone pushed the wrong person one too many times and paid for it in ways they never saw coming. And before we dive in, do me one quick favor. If you enjoy stories like these, tap that subscribe button right now. It is completely free, it takes 1 second, and it genuinely helps this channel grow more than you could imagine. Seriously, hit subscribe, and you will never miss a new batch. Now, get comfortable, and let us get into it. This was posted to our /pettyrevenge. There's something about the way people look at you when they know your grandmother is a 78-year-old widow. It's like, oh, she's gonna let that go. And my grandma? She didn't just let it go. Little did they think, she owned the building. I'll get to that part in a bit, but first, some context. I was living with my grandmother in her little studio apartment for as long as I can remember. She had bought a nice little corner building in our town and rented out 2 of the units while staying in one herself. Sure, it was a tight squeeze, but every penny counted. Then came along this new landlord. His name is Mark. He showed up with an air of superiority, a clipboard in hand, and a stern look on his face. "We're raising your rent from $900 to $2,400, he said. Yeah, that's what they always say before the hammer drops. I thought I was going to have to go through the usual fight with my grandmother. You know, the, "Oh honey, I can't afford it" routine. But she surprised me. She looked at him and asked, "Why do you think this is fair?" Mark sneered, "Because I'm the landlord." "Of course," she said dryly. "And what would your grandmother say if she could see how you're treating people?" The room was silent except for her calm voice. Mark's face turned red with rage, but then he composed himself and went on. "Look, old lady, just sign here or I'm calling the sheriff." She took a deep breath, looked at me, and said, "I think we should do this. It's only fair to make things more expensive for him. Let him know what it feels like." So, we signed that lease and moved out. She paid $2,400 in one fell swoop. Not exactly with cash, but she had the money to back it up. She sold a few stocks I hadn't even known about, that kind of thing. For 3 years, Mark tried to evict us every month using all sorts of flimsy excuses. He said the building was in disrepair. Well, it wasn't. It was just waiting for someone with a bit more gumption than him to come along. He claimed we were overcharging tenants, when we had the contracts right there, signed by Mark himself. Finally, one month he tried to kick me out completely. We sued him and won. It took months of paperwork, but in the end, his property was up for grabs. And you know what? She ended up buying it outright. Now she's my landlord again. But this time, I'm paying $2,400 because that's what she wants.
1 second before this video moves on, I need to tell you something important. I am going to admit something dumb because I did it for months, and maybe you are doing it right now. Every night, I burned about 2 hours on my phone watching videos, and I got exactly nothing back. 2 hours a night, every night, and the only thing I had the next morning was a dead battery. Then somebody showed me an app that pays real money for that same watch time. My first reaction was, scam. So I installed it just to prove it was fake. I let one video run to the end and a value showed up. Second video, same thing. Third one, same. And I was not doing anything different from any other night. But the real test was the withdrawal, because any app can show you pretty numbers. So I asked for mine. It went through. That is where the dumb part ended, and I started paying attention. The system is simple, which is why it works. Paid by watch time. The more you watch, the more it stacks. Not a raffle, not gambling, no credit card, and nothing to pay to get in. You go through the link, download it, and create the account with an email in under a minute. Then you open the list of available videos, pick one, and let it run all the way to the end. And I want to be honest about the size of this because I hate videos that promise a fortune. Nobody here is quitting their job this month because the hours were already gone. They were gone last year, they were gone last night, and nobody was ever going to give them back to me. The second thing I got wrong was thinking I had to be on the app all day. You do not. It counts the same minutes you were already burning. The commute, the line at the store, the wait at the clinic. That is where almost all of it came from, and none of it felt like effort. And the third thing, The one that actually mattered. I stopped closing videos early once I understood that a started video pays nothing at all. That detail separates the people who earn from the people who complain. Finished video not started. The link is pinned in the first comment of this video. Tap it and test it the same way I did. And if you are on a big screen, scan the code with your phone camera and you are straight in. People are doing this all over the world, almost always in dead time. The commute, the line, the wait. That is the actual trick, and it is not a secret. Minutes you are losing anyway now count for you. If you think this is nonsense, good. I did too, and no video convinced me. The test did. So do not believe me. Give it 10 minutes today and let the numbers answer you directly, because worse than wasting your time is wasting it for free, and you have done that for years.
The kicker is, we get a percentage of all future rent. It might not be enough to live off, but we've managed. And the joy on Mark's face every month when he sends us more money than he was getting. Priceless. Let me know in the comments if you would have done the same. This was posted to our /entitled people. It's a stark reminder of how long one can endure before striking back. Sometimes, it takes decades and a lifetime of silently bearing insult after insult. I've always been close with my grandmother, who has a wit as sharp as her tongue. But that didn't stop me from getting sick to my stomach every time she would look at me with a forced smile while I heard my son-in-law crack jokes about how she was senile during family gatherings. It was like he had a key to the room of his own insecurities and used it to torment her, leaving us all standing awkwardly by, not daring to step in. My grandmother, bless her heart, always tried to stay optimistic. But after 11 years of silently enduring these taunts, she came up with a plan. One that would make me wish I had been the one who devised it. A year before her 80th birthday, she sat me down and showed me something she had signed 11 years ago, 3 years before she ever seemed to show any signs of what they were calling senility. She told me about the trust amendment that moved a hefty sum of $640,000 from my son-in-law's account to ours. This, she said firmly, as if planting seeds for the future, is how I plan to put this behind us. The day came, and we gathered for her birthday dinner. As expected, the jokes started flying, and my son-in-law was no exception. He made some of his usual jabs, but this time, my grandmother didn't just smile back or laugh it off. She seemed almost gleeful as she cleared her throat and began to read from a piece of paper. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said with a steely glare at my husband, "before we dig into the cake, I have something important to share." There was a palpable silence in the room as everyone turned to look at her. She continued, "I am proud of you all for your children, but I've done some thinking and I realized something. I'm not just old, I'm smart. And I wanted to make sure that my hard-earned money wouldn't fall into someone else's hands without a fight." She then read the amendment aloud, detailing exactly what she had done. "I hereby direct my trust fund manager to transfer $640,000 from my joint account with my husband, William Huxley, into this account for my grandchildren to use as they see fit." The shock on everyone's faces was priceless. My son-in-law looked like he'd just been handed a grenade. The room fell silent, and my son-in-law was dumbfounded. His face had turned red with anger, but he couldn't find the words. My grandmother watched him intently for a moment before continuing. "And I think it's important that you know, this is just one of many steps I've taken to ensure your children have what they deserve." In the days and weeks that followed, there were whispers around town about the sudden wealth of some of my family members. But no one dared question what had happened at that dinner table in front of us all. Looking back, I realize now that every time my grandmother chose not to confront him, it wasn't because she was weak or didn't care. It's just that sometimes, the best payback is saving up until you have something truly substantial to throw back in someone's face. Let me know in the comments if you would have done the same. This was posted to our /malicious compliance. In a small but tech-savvy startup, one person was indispensable yet underpaid. She's Edna, 71, our building's cleaner, also the keeper of all its digital secrets. The story starts with Edna being told she's too old for the job and will be let go at year-end, despite her never calling in sick or missing a day since starting 3 years ago. This came out of the blue during a morning meeting where everyone got bad news: budget cuts. I couldn't help but notice that Edna, barely 5 feet 2 inches with kind eyes, was the one chosen to save $400 per month. Edna had been quietly creating something invaluable during her lunch breaks and after hours. She wrote out a comprehensive manual on every part of our building's security systems and HVAC operations, about 22 pages in total. I couldn't believe it. There wasn't a single digit or key detail missing. Edna knew everything about the badge system, the boiler operation, and even which light switches controlled certain sections of the offices. She'd been working on this for years, and now they wanted to fire her without saying anything about these manual contributions. I couldn't just sit idly by while they cut an invaluable asset, so I decided to act. I started by compiling all the emails she had received over the past few months from HR about budget cuts and layoffs. They were vague, but clearly hinted at reducing unnecessary expenses. With each email, Edna's name was mentioned in passing as a cost. The next day, armed with these emails and some clever timing, I called into the morning meeting and told them, I noticed that the emails mention Edna's name more than any other employee. Is there something specific you need to let me know about her contribution? She's been working diligently without asking for credit. Everyone was taken aback, even the CEO who had only met Edna a couple of times. I then suggested having a meeting just to discuss Edna's manual and its value to us. The CEO agreed. During that meeting, I laid out all 22 pages of her manual, itemizing every detail she had recorded over 3 years. I explained how her knowledge was irreplaceable, especially since no one else knew these systems as well as she did. Edna came in late, wearing a clean uniform, and when she saw the manual on the table, her eyes widened with surprise. She quickly scanned it, nodded, and then started to cry. The CEO looked at me, puzzled, but I pressed my advantage by saying, we can't risk losing Edna. We need this manual, and we need someone like Edna who knows everything here. In the end, they decided to let Edna stay on as a consultant for $400 more per month. She wasn't even asked for her manual back. She simply left with it as if nothing had happened. The other employees were skeptical at first, but when they saw how valuable Edna's knowledge was and realized no one else could do what she did, they accepted the decision. Now, every time we need a system tweaked or fixed, someone calls to ask for Edna's help. She's become a local legend of sorts in our community. I can't say if I would have done exactly the same, but knowing how much Edna contributed and not letting them get away with it felt like the right thing to do. Let me know in the comments if you would have done the same. This was posted to our /pro_revenge. Grandpa Larry had hit rock bottom, but he wasn't going down without a fight. You see, his grandson had been photographing every unpermitted construction joint in their town over 2 years for his job as an inspector at the local building department. One day, a smooth-talking contractor showed up on Grandpa's doorstep, let's call him Bob, to claim he could do all those fancy home improvements Larry had always dreamt of but never dared to hire anyone for. Grandpa was in his early 70s, still hale and hearty, despite the back problems that plagued him from years of hard labor. He knew that if he went through with this remodel, it would be a significant financial hit, and Bob seemed eager enough to cut corners. But he couldn't just sit by and let someone cheat on his hard-earned money. The setup was simple. Grandpa had done his due diligence and documented everything meticulously, down to the tiniest detail. He showed Bob every photo of his work as an inspector, illustrating that all the changes needed were unpermitted. This meant the contractor would face serious legal trouble if he proceeded with this remodel without a permit. But oh no, Bob had other ideas. He suggested they sign on the dotted line for $38,000, and then he'd make sure everything was done by the book. Sitting in his cozy living room, a cup of tea by his side, Grandpa had the sinking feeling that something wasn't right. But his pride was at stake, as was maintaining the integrity of his work. He decided to let Bob sign the contract, and then get a second opinion from a friend who happened to be a lawyer. Grandpa had to play it cool and assure Bob he trusted him implicitly. He took out his smartphone and dialed his buddy Alex, a middle-aged man with a penchant for obscure legal trivia. After explaining everything over the phone in hushed tones, they both knew that this deal couldn't possibly hold up in court. But Grandpa still needed to follow through with it and get the contractor on the hook. Fast forward to day 1 of work. Bob showed up bright and early with a crew of 3 guys. They started with some minor touch-ups, but you could tell something was amiss almost immediately. The paint was applied shoddily, and they began working without permits or inspections. Grandpa couldn't believe his eyes. When they finished the first day's work, Grandpa stepped out to take a look at their handiwork. He snapped pictures of everything, ensuring he'd have airtight evidence. "This isn't up to par," Bob told him curtly. "We need some more time." And with that, he left without saying goodbye. Over the next few days, Grandpa continued to document every detail, taking photos and keeping meticulous notes on what was being done. He even managed to get his building department friend to send an unpermitted notice via email, which Bob conveniently ignored. One day, as Bob and his crew were leaving after a particularly messy week of work, Grandpa finally had enough. He called the contractor's office and spoke with their boss, whom he knew from their mutual professional circles. "Bob mentioned that your company was using unpermitted practices on this project," he said calmly. The boss got visibly nervous but tried to brush it off. Grandpa wasn't buying it. He repeated what his friend had documented, including the exact dates and descriptions of each violation. The company's boss blanched, realizing they were in deep trouble. They agreed to send a new crew to finish the job properly. In the end, the whole ordeal cost Bob around $16,000, which he paid on multiple installments over several months. Grandpa kept all his receipts and emails as proof of what transpired. Afterward, there was no denying that Bob had cheated both him and the building department out of thousands. The satisfaction was tangible. Grandpa Larry may have given in to a little revenge, but he did so with grace and strategy. He knew that justice prevailed, and it felt good to be the one who held the high ground. Let me know in the comments if you would have done the same. This was posted to our /PettyRevenge. Let's set the scene. I live in a quaint suburban neighborhood, nestled among perfectly manicured lawns and tidy houses. The HOA president, Alex, had been running his show with an iron fist for as long as anyone could remember. But there's something you should know about him. His name is Alexander. And yes, he's actually got that name. For the first 8 months, I decided to let it go, thinking maybe it was just a phase, or maybe the other homeowners and I were missing out on what a good leader looks like. But Alex had a habit of making things awkward. At every HOA meeting, which is weekly, he would inevitably call my grandmother confused. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why am I even mentioning this? Well, because each time it happened, the entire room would freeze. The only noise being my grandmother clearing her throat and saying, "Pardon," as if she were trying to wake up from a nap. The other residents seemed to know just as well that Alex was baiting us. I ignored his antics for 8 whole months, hoping someone else in the community would stand up against him first. But by month 9, I had collected signatures for 61 out of 74 homeowners. It was time to act. The night before the recall vote, I gathered everyone who signed my petition into my backyard. We were all a mix of ages and backgrounds, but we shared one thing: frustration with Alexander's leadership. I spoke about what he had done to make our lives difficult, from denying late payment extensions on fines without reason, to being overly harsh when enforcing rules. I asked the group if they were ready to put an end to his reign, and every single hand shot up. We decided that 1 vote was enough from each homeowner who signed, so we just needed a simple majority, 38 signatures for the recall, plus Alex himself to make 40 total. The day of the vote arrived, and everyone was on edge. The board meeting started as usual. Alex called my grandmother confused again, and she answered like always, but this time I wasn't holding back. "Alex, stop," I said loudly when it got too much. The room fell silent. "All right, folks, let's have a vote on whether or not to recall the current HOA president," I continued smoothly. "Who is in favor of recalling Alex as our HOA president?" The silence was deafening as everyone looked at each other, then back to me. I gestured toward the board members, each nodding their heads subtly. Alex's eyes darted around the room. He tried to count faces with his fingers, but he wasn't fast enough. 40 votes, a member of my group whispered in my ear. The vote was unanimous, 41 in favor, including the president himself. Alex's face was a mix of shock and fury as he was immediately declared unfit for office by the vice president standing next to me. He stormed out without another word. The relief in our community was palpable. I had not only removed one bad apple, but also set an example that sometimes it takes just one person to make change happen. Let me know in the comments if you would have done the same. Quick pause. If that one got you, smash the like button. One tap, it costs you nothing. And it is the single biggest thing that pushes these stories to more people. And drop a comment. Would you have had the nerve to do the same? I read them. All right, Next one. This was posted to our/legal advice. It's about a 55-year-old woman I'll call Mary, who's 83 years old and had the misfortune of dealing with an unscrupulous dealership. You see, she believed in reading everything thoroughly, especially something as important as a car contract. It all started when her son gifted her a car for her birthday. But before signing, they tried to upsell her on various packages worth over $6,700. Maintenance, warranties, insurance. All the usual fluff. She knew better than to agree so quickly and said, "Hold on a second, I need to read this." The salesperson looked like he was about to have a panic attack, but they waited. So there she sat, reading through the contract while they anxiously watched her. After a few minutes, she noticed something peculiar. She thought back to her first job in 1962 when she worked as an auditor at a bank, checking loan documents for accuracy. It came to her. Her past as an auditor should have made this moment second nature. But even then, the dealership didn't see it that way. Said salesperson said, "Ma'am, you don't understand. These are all standard packages." And she replied calmly, "I'm sure they are, but let me check if I'm missing something important." They tried to hush her, whispering amongst themselves, clearly uncomfortable. But Mary was unfazed and continued reading the fine print with a steady gaze. "Now," she said, pointing to one section, "this says I have to pay an additional $300 for something called basic maintenance. It sounds like it should be included in the regular service plan." She paused, scanning her surroundings. "And this warranty here," she pointed again, "they're asking me to sign for a 2-year warranty that costs another $2,500? For what exactly?" At first, they tried to stall, but then they panicked. The salesperson offered her a drink and a snack as if trying to buy time. She declined with a firm, "No thank you," and continued, "I might be 83 years old, but I still read contracts." Mary took out her phone and quickly calculated the total amount, showing it to them. "My grandson got me this car for my birthday. But now, this is nearly as much as a down payment on another vehicle." She looked at them sternly. "This doesn't feel right, does it?" The salesperson tried one last time, saying, "Ma'am, if we don't do these packages, you might have issues in the future." "Future me will be just fine," Mary said decisively. "I'm not signing until I can make sure this is all legal and includes everything it's supposed to." She took out her phone again and called a friend who worked as a lawyer. "Can you check something for me? I think they're trying to rip me off." Her friend agreed to check the contract, but warned Mary, "Be careful. Some dealerships might try to squeeze extra money from older people because of their inexperience or just general weariness with dealing with them." The salesperson finally gave up and conceded. "Look, ma'am, we can take this straight into the office. Let's get a second opinion." They quickly gathered her paperwork and shuffled off to a conference room. Inside, they brought in an elderly lawyer who was clearly uncomfortable taking on such a case, but did so out of professionalism. After going over every detail with Mary, the lawyer confirmed that everything was indeed optional and not necessary for safe operation or warranty coverage. He signed off on it and told the dealership to take their packages elsewhere. In the end, they agreed to reduce her total bill by $5,300, leaving her with a more manageable amount closer to what she paid for the car itself. And when Mary walked out of the dealership with the adjusted contract in hand, she felt like a real superhero who had just saved herself from an unfair deal. Let me know in the comments if you would have done the same. This was posted to our/entitled people. The title alone should have had everyone reaching for their popcorn. "My aunt moved in and destroyed Grandma's house." I felt like my eyes couldn't handle the gory detail, so I scrolled right past it. Little did I know, this one had a happily ever after twist, or at least a revengeful one. You see, my grandma, Betty, was a retired school teacher who lived in her cozy little house since 1975. She never married and had no kids, so when she was diagnosed with a hip that needed surgery, things looked grim. But as fate would have it, I found out that her niece, my Aunt Marge, offered to move into Betty's home while she recovered. Betty wasn't thrilled but accepted the offer because of Marge's promise to take good care of everything until Betty got back on her feet. Little did anyone know, this was just a ploy for Marge to take over the house and turn it into something only she could appreciate. On the day Marge moved in, my sister brought over Betty's furniture from storage. My sister asked me if I had time to help unload some of it and set up the new stuff Marge got delivered that morning. As we were unpacking boxes, Marge wandered in, her eyes gleaming with excitement about all the renovations she was going to do. She pulled out a plan with dollar signs next to every expense. $10,000 for a designer kitchen, $5,000 for a marble fireplace, and another $2,000 for new furniture that would complement the modern aesthetic. I couldn't believe it. We were talking about 40 years of memories, not just stuff. Marge made it clear that the house was now hers to make over, and she wanted everything done within 2 weeks. Betty protested loudly at first, but then fell silent when Marge threatened to get a restraining order if she didn't shut up. With Betty incapacitated in rehab, I had no choice but to watch as Marge's vision slowly came to life, with new appliances that screamed stainless steel and modern, replacing the old wooden tables and antique lamps. The smell of paint fumes filled every corner. My favorite armchair was ripped out. A whole wing of the house was gutted for the update. And in a stroke of sheer luck, or so I thought, Marge's contractors lost all her original furniture somewhere between the storage unit and the dumpster. When Betty returned home from rehab, she was appalled. Her lifelong belongings were gone, replaced by generic, shiny things that looked like they belonged on a TV commercial. Marge had the nerve to tell her, "Grandma, you don't need that old stuff anymore. It's time for an upgrade." Betty broke down in tears, but before she could say anything, the doors and locks of the house were suddenly changed. It was as if someone had switched their lives around overnight, and Marge walked out with a smug look on her face. One day, I overheard Marge talking to one of her friends about how she was going to sell the house soon since it didn't feel like home anymore. My stomach churned, but before I could do anything, there came an unexpected twist that made everything right in the world again. I had started discreetly investigating Marge's financial records and found out about a mysterious 401k account with a sudden large sum, enough to buy a nice house elsewhere. With that evidence, I contacted a lawyer who helped me draft a letter to Marge, stating that she was under investigation for fraud and embezzlement. To my astonishment, the day after sending it, Marge was arrested outside of her own house when some contractors found a hidden safe full of cash, enough to buy a new place on the other side of town. The house returned to Betty without a fight from Marge, who was now in jail, and all the furniture was still in storage. Betty couldn't be more relieved. She finally called me that night, thanking me for everything, but saying it felt too good to be real. But I knew better by then. In my 32 years of life, I had learned one thing. People like Marge don't just disappear into thin air. Let me know in the comments if you would have done the same. This was posted to our /pro revenge. I thought I'd finally cracked. This private facility had been ignoring my complaints for 5 whole months in a row. Now, I knew better than anyone that it takes time to get anything done in state bureaucracy, but come on, 5 months. And they knew exactly who I was. They just pretended not to know. Because they're the kind of company that thinks they can get away with anything. I'd been a nurse for 31 years before I took on this new job as a state inspector. For 3 decades, my career had revolved around ensuring safety and quality in healthcare facilities. But when I started at this private facility as an inspector, something rubbed me the wrong way from the get-go. I kept finding issues with their operations, but every time I tried to bring it up, they just brushed me off. One complaint after another, staff shortages, outdated equipment, fire hazards, and more. 5 months, and not a peep. I was starting to think maybe my career in inspections was over before it had truly begun. That's when the light bulb went on. This place wasn't just ignoring me. They were counting on ignorance. They knew who I was, my job title, experience, everything. They must have been so confident that nobody else would be able to do their dirty work while they sipped lattes and complained about health inspections. And then, the final straw. One day, a staff member walked up to me with a box of files, and in this snarky voice, said, "You're the one who knows everything." I almost died on the spot. No way were we done here. It was time for payback. So, my plan was simple. Send them the same treatment they'd been doling out to me all along. But with a little twist. I would go in as a new inspector, wearing one of their old uniforms from 10 years ago. And you know what? It worked. I walked right past them and took over their own inspection. I knocked on their door, still dressed in the outdated uniform, and introduced myself. "Hi there," I said with a fake smile. "I'm new here, Inspector Sarah Thompson. I was just assigned to do an inspection." The look of shock on their faces? Priceless. They tried to brush me off, but this time, They were dealing with an actual state inspector who had been on the job for 31 years. We went through every single issue, and I documented everything. They got a stern warning and a hefty fine, all because it took 5 months of their nonsense. I can tell you right now, the feeling was indescribable. 5 months of passive-aggressive posturing? Check. 3 decades of experience making things right? Check. A bit of revenge to boot? Double check. So, there you have it. How I turned the tables and got them where they never expected. Let me know in the comments if you would have done the same. This was posted to our /petty revenge. It's an old story, but it's still worth retelling because of how meticulously planned and executed the payback was. Here goes. I never thought my grandfather would get screwed over so badly by a repair shop, especially one that claimed to be family-owned. My grandpa, let's call him Frank, had just hit his late 70s and was still driving his old car to do errands for the family. One day, a light started blinking on his dashboard, indicating an issue with the alternator. I suggested he take it to our local auto repair shop, owned by this couple we knew from church, the Browns. The Browns were always friendly, but Frank wasn't sure about their business practices since they also provided home repairs and landscaping services. But what could a small shop in our small town screw him over for, right? So, Frank took his car to them after he had been driving it for almost 2 years with that blinking light. The Browns told him the alternator needed to be replaced and did so without issue. They even gave him a 20% discount because of his age and membership at their church. Frank thought nothing more about it until his next issue came up, which was around 9 months later. Again, he pulled into the shop with another lit-up light. The Browns said the same thing. Frank, we've got to replace your alternator. This time, they charged him $350. Fast forward 6 more months. Frank had a third incident. He went in for his usual check, and once again, the Browns said it was time to get another new alternator. Frank thought, surely this can't be right, but he had been paying bills all year without much issue, so he gave them the money. 9 months later, Frank had his 4th instance of the same problem. But instead of just giving in again like before, he decided something needed to change. He started keeping every single invoice and receipt from these visits. He asked the Browns for itemized bills each time, noting down dates and amounts meticulously. By the time he got up to 4 separate alternator replacements, Frank had kept over 20 pages of invoices and receipts amounting to around $1,400. He decided to take his case to a small claims court, which was something he never thought he would do. The Browns argued that they provided new parts each time, but Frank knew that wasn't true from the receipts he had kept diligently. He also had screenshots of old emails where they admitted to using the same part multiple times. The judge at the small claims hearing was swayed by Frank's evidence. He ruled in favor of Frank and awarded him 3 times the amount on all 4 invoices, totaling $4,800. The Browns tried appealing but lost the case in court. It wasn't just about the money for my grandpa. It was about getting his voice heard and making sure no one else would fall victim to similar practices. The shop has since had a few other complaints about overcharging for parts, which I'm pretty sure Frank's actions played a part in. Let me know in the comments if you would have done the same. This was posted to our /malicious compliance. It all started when my grandma, Helen, got that annoying message about a charge on her card. She tried using the app, but the bank said she needed to be 35 or older to understand how it worked. They told her point blank, "You're too old." Helen was 76 years old and an accountant by trade. She knew how to spot a scam from miles away. I've seen her deal with every type of fraud, but this one had her stumped. She did some research and found that most people over 65 use the app just fine. My dad helped Helen set it up on his tablet, but when she tried it at home, the bank's tech support said nope, not for someone as old as her. They insisted she needed to dispute charges in person. So began my grandma's epic battle with the bank. I mean, imagine having to go into a branch just to push a button on an online app. 6 weeks. That's 126 days of driving back and forth, standing in lines, filling out forms. It was like she had been drafted for a war. The first few times, Helen was annoyed but not too bothered. But as the weeks went by, her patience wore thin. She started leaving sarcastic comments on social media about the old geezer who needs to learn something new. One day, after 6 weeks of in-person visits, I got a call from Dad. "Helen's done," he said triumphantly. "Done with what?" I asked, but then Mom filled me in. She went back and filed all those disputed charges on the app herself. I laughed when I read her response to the bank's customer service team. Wow, 6 weeks of your time, and my grandma finally figures out how the thing works. Looks like I'll be sending you a check for $60 just so you can go through the motions one more time, and then I'm moving on. Helen was thrilled when she heard about it from me, but also a bit embarrassed. The bank had been treating her like an 8-year-old, and my grandma? She'd shown them. The response was swift. A week later, Helen got a call from the branch manager. He apologized profusely and asked if he could buy her lunch to make it up to her. My grandma laughed at him, but agreed. Now, whenever someone mentions ageism or says something like, too old to understand, I tell them about my grandma, Helen. She taught me that we never stop learning, even when others try to limit us by our age. Let me know in the comments if you would have done the same. We are right about halfway. If you are still here, do me 2 quick favors. Hit that like button and hit subscribe so the next batch finds you automatically. And tell me down in the comments which story so far was the most satisfying one. Now, this next one might be my favorite of the whole batch. This was posted to our /pro_revenge. I thought my life couldn't get any weirder until my mother-in-law started her little scheme. She had been bugging me about visiting more often, saying she missed me so much it hurt. Then one day she walked into the house with a big smile and a story to tell about Grandma, that sweet old lady who we thought would never notice anything out of place. Mom, I said as soon as she started in, I noticed something was off when you came over last month. She just laughed at me. But 4 months later, the realization hit her. Grandma was not oblivious. In fact, she had meticulously tracked everything that went missing, from a pair of pearl earrings to 2 necklaces. The whole family was abuzz with whispers and suspicions, but none of us wanted to come forward. Until one day, my mother-in-law's pride took a hit when I caught her snooping through Grandma's jewelry box. She had conveniently forgotten the whereabouts of those pearls she claimed were safe in the bottom drawer. Instead, they were on display at that fancy pawn shop down the street. That was the spark I needed to finally take action. I spent weeks gathering evidence, keeping a secret notebook and making sure every receipt from the pawn shop was filed away meticulously. When my mother-in-law started boasting about how Grandma's jewelry had disappeared without any drama or fuss, it felt like my patience was running thin. The payback needed to be clever and satisfying. I came up with an insurance policy that would cover the exact amount of lost jewelry, $20,000 in total. It wasn't much, but enough for them to really squirm. I had to do everything by the book, including filing a police report and getting an insurance rider signed. When my mother-in-law found out about the policy, she was livid. "You can't do that," she cried, her face a mixture of anger and betrayal. I just smirked at her. The receipts from the pawn shop had to be perfect, every transaction dated and itemized. When Grandma finally noticed something missing, just like on day 1, she knew exactly what was going on. The whole family gathered for Christmas dinner a few months later, with my mother-in-law as the center of attention. Grandma's first question went straight to the point. "Why is your necklace missing?" My mother-in-law tried to explain that Grandma must have misplaced it again, but the moment she pulled out her insurance policy and handed over copies of the pawn shop receipts, the jig was up. The room fell silent as my mother-in-law mumbled an apology. Grandma's eyes sparkled with satisfaction as she took in the outcome. The whispers turned into laughter, and I couldn't help but feel a mix of relief and vindication. Let me know in the comments if you would have done the same. This was posted to our /petty-revenge. So here's how it all went down. I've had this one in my chest for a long time, but I'm finally ready to let it out. My neighbor, let's just call him Bob, he's a real piece of work. For the longest time, he parked his SUV right on my lawn every single morning and evening, like he owned the place. Now, I know some might say who cares, but when something's been going on for over 2 years, it starts to get pretty annoying. Bob was super nice to me at first. He'd wave as I grabbed my coffee in the morning, and we'd exchange pleasantries about the weather or the kids. But then he started parking his car. At first, it was just a few hours here and there, but soon enough, it was all day long, every single day. And get this, he had the nerve to say he needed space for his driveway. Now, my lawyer called in a survey from the experts who laid out our property lines when we bought the house. And guess what? It turns out Bob's driveway is literally on my lawn. 11 whole feet of it, just sitting there, chewing up green grass like it was nothing. So naturally, I did some research and found the legal route to take. The first thing I did was send him a friendly but firm email. You know, polite and all. Hey Bob, I wrote. You might be aware that your driveway seems to encroach onto my property a bit. Would you mind moving it back slightly? We could split the cost of repaving if that works for you. Bob didn't reply. So next up was sending out official cease and desist letters. The law firm I hired did all the heavy lifting, but every time they called me to check on things or send a reminder, Bob would say he'd get right on it, just as soon as he finished something else. Of course, that something never seemed to materialize. Determined not to let this go, I decided to make an example of him. So here's what happened next. I hired a landscape architect and designed the perfect plan. It involved installing a series of strategically placed decorative bricks around his driveway to visually reclaim my land. And guess who paid for it? You guessed it, Bob. First stop was a local supplier who specialized in high-end hardscaping materials. I bought enough decorative bricks, edging stones, and pavers to cover the entire 11 feet. Then, I called Bob's number and arranged to have them installed while he wasn't home. When I got there, my crew arrived with a truck full of materials. They set up shop just like any other landscaping job, cutting through the grass carefully as not to damage anything. My neighbors even stopped by to admire the progress. Meanwhile, I texted Bob. Just popped over. Landscaping work going well here. Bob, clearly taken aback by this unannounced invasion of his space, called me back a few hours later. He was pretty upset. What are you doing on my property? He demanded. I calmly replied. Well, you've been parked there for years and claiming it's part of your driveway. I just wanted to make sure our boundaries were clear. He started to protest, but the crew had already started laying down the bricks in a neat pattern, outlining his former space. I pointed out the designs to him as my workers finished the job, explaining how we could still technically repave if he agreed to move it. The next morning, Bob was out on his front porch looking at his newly demarcated property. He came over and started yelling at me. How dare you? This is ridiculous. I calmly replied. Bob, just think about it from my perspective too. It's no fun to look out the window every day and see your driveway in my yard. In the end, he backed down. We had a deal. He moved his driveway slightly back while I repaved the new section with an even more attractive finish. And the best part? He ended up spending close to $5,000 on moving his entire property line. So what did you think about it? Would you have gone after the neighbor who parked illegally for so long? Let me know in the comments if you would have done the same. This was posted to our /malicious compliance. It all started when I worked as a scheduler at a small healthcare clinic in my home city. I had been with the company for over 2 decades, and they knew that if anyone could keep their schedule organized, it was me. Now, this sounds like a pretty standard story, right? But not for management. They decided to start cutting costs and tried to reduce our staffing levels. One day, they dropped my hours from 35 down to just 12 per week. I wasn't the only one. Several of us were hit with similar reductions. The first day working those reduced hours was a disaster. I spent all night trying to get my head around what had to be done in half the time. It was ridiculous, but hey, I've seen worse than 12-hour shifts. So, I kept my chin up and did what needed to be done. But then came the second day. My manager called at 2 in the morning because he couldn't get anyone else to figure out how to build the shift grid for our 140 employees. They had a critical shift that night, and nobody could do it except me, even though I only had 12 hours on my schedule. I'm not one to be easily upset by stuff like this, but my blood began to boil when he started yelling at me for being too slow. You are the best scheduler we have, he said, but you can't do your job properly anymore. It's just unacceptable. I had been a rock in their team for so long, and now they were treating me like some sort of incompetent. I decided to take matters into my own hands. I created a detailed plan on how to get the shift grid done with the limited hours I was given. Here's what happened. First thing in the morning, I texted all the new scheduling staff the steps I had laid out. If you can't build these shifts within 2 hours, use this guide and try your best, I said. I wanted to make sure they knew exactly how to handle it. Then, at 10:30 p.m. that night, just as we were supposed to be done for the day, my manager called. I need you here now, he shouted. I was on a Zoom meeting with a client at that time, but I left immediately because I knew they needed me. After 3 hours of intense work, I finally finished everything and sent it off. But instead of appreciating the effort, he thanked me with this. We'll be cutting your hours back to 6 from now on. That was when I knew they hadn't just been bluffing. This was no longer a negotiation. It was an assault. So here's what I did next. I sent out a public statement to her/malicious compliance. They cut my hours because I'm slow, but then couldn't even manage the schedule without me. What the hell is wrong with this picture? I detailed everything. The hours reduction, the shift grid fiasco, and how they called me at 2 a.m. despite knowing it would affect patient care. I also included a screenshot of the internal chat where my manager had said, "She's going to be too slow," just before cutting my hours. To my surprise, the post went viral. I got support from people all over who were facing similar situations. Management saw that they couldn't hide behind their so-called efficiency measures anymore. They eventually caved and not only returned my hours, but also apologized publicly for mistreating me and other employees like this. Let me know in the comments if you would have done the same. This was posted to our/entitled people. Let's dive straight into it. I never thought of myself as someone who would go to such lengths to get back at my grandmother, but I guess when you feel wronged, you do what you have to do. My grandma had been the quiet one at every holiday for 30 years, always giving and expecting nothing in return. But there was something she hadn't counted on, me. It started with a simple loan of $200 back in 1994 when I needed it for college books, and my parents couldn't help out. She said no problem and jotted down the amount in a small leather-bound notebook that now held an unbelievable number of entries. Each page was filled with her meticulous handwriting, recording every dollar she had ever lent me or my siblings, along with promises of gifts we'd never receive. I tried to put it behind me. After all, she helped us when no one else could. But by the time I graduated and landed a decent job at Google, things had changed. She was pushing 80 and still making claims for help, each request more strained than the last. One day, over dinner, I heard her talking to my parents about how much she needed from me. That's when the penny dropped. I began pouring through that ancient notebook. It wasn't just a few loans. It was an entire ledger of exploitation. The total? $212,000. My grandmother had been living off our hard-earned money for decades. I felt sick, but the more I read, the angrier I got. The next step involved getting everyone to admit their share. I started by asking my siblings if they knew about it. Each one had received thousands over the years. They were shocked and didn't like what they saw. It was clear they had no idea. Then came the emails, the phone calls. Every family member got a taste of their own medicine. One particularly nasty interaction I recall. I called my grandmother right after her birthday. I said, "Mom, you remember those gifts you promised and never delivered over the years? Well, you know what? It's your birthday, and it's not like you have to do anything special for yourself. Just remember all the times we gave you. Maybe just take a few extra trips to the supermarket or something." She was taken aback, but didn't want to admit defeat. We argued, and I knew I had her. She finally admitted to lying about loan amounts and even borrowing from my sisters without their consent. By the end of it all, the family dynamic changed dramatically. My grandmother's requests dwindled to nothing. She realized she couldn't keep taking advantage like before. The entire affair made me realize that sometimes you just have to call out what's wrong and deal with the consequences head on. Let me know in the comments if you would have done the same. Real quick, like button, one tap. Seriously, it helps this channel more than you think. Subscribe too if you have not yet. And I want to hear it. Have you ever had a boss, a neighbor, or an in-law exactly like this one? Comment it below. Okay, the best payback is still coming. This was posted to our/pro-revenge. Here's how it went down. I was minding my own business one afternoon when I stumbled upon an ad for a gift card scammer trying to con people out of their hard-earned cash. I'm not going to name the old lady, but she was 81 years young and looking for some company on the phone. So we struck up a conversation. She started telling me all about how she had been duped by scammers before, losing thousands of dollars in her lifetime, and now she wanted to make sure no one else fell victim to their tricks. I nodded along, pretending to be the sympathetic young ear she needed. That's when I got an idea that could help both of us. I suggested she call the number back and walk them through the scam step by step, just as they did with her. She was skeptical at first, but seeing how much grief these scammers had caused her in the past, she agreed to give it a go. We set up a time for her to be on the line when I could catch her call. The day finally came. I sat down with my laptop and got ready to watch the show. The scammer called, thinking he was targeting someone new. But our elderly friend was about 81 years their senior and had done her homework. She started asking all the right questions about the gift card details, why they needed so much personal information, What would happen if she didn't provide it? After 40 minutes of me guiding her through the conversation, she finally broke them with a clever question about what to do once she got the gift card. The scammer couldn't handle it and hung up, leaving us in stitches. She told me later that the fraud unit had been trying for a month to reach this number without success. Now, thanks to her relentless persistence on the phone, they finally had them. When I mentioned my involvement, she just laughed and said, "I don't know what to do with you young folks." I thought I was going crazy talking to myself. The whole ordeal felt like a bit of poetic justice for all those years of suffering at their hands. And who knew 81 could be such a potent age when it comes to outsmarting scammers? Let me know in the comments if you would have done the same. This was posted to our /legal advice. I knew the moment our small-town gossip mill picked up that widow's story, it would all come back around. So here goes. It started like any other day when I got an email from some guy named Alex. Said he was representing a big development company and had a great deal for me. Now, I'm not one to turn down deals, but you have to know your stuff in this market. Anyway, Alex offered $190,000 for my late husband's 60-acre farm. It wasn't much, sure, but it was enough for me to live comfortably on my small pension. But there was a catch. Alex mentioned that the parcel had a conservation easement. Now, I knew nothing about this stuff, so naturally, I did some digging. Turns out, my husband had put all 60 acres into a conservation easement years ago under a program to preserve farmland. He thought it would keep his land green and prevent any developers from turning our home into a sprawling mall. At the time, he never imagined we'd be in this mess now. I decided I was going to find out more about this before signing anything. Alex said he could help me get an appraisal and even throw in an extra 10 grand if I signed right away. That's when I made my call to action. I needed to educate myself, and I needed some legal advice. I called a real estate lawyer friend of mine who was like, "Oh yeah, that's a conservation easement. You can't sell the land, you know that." She explained it meant developers couldn't build on it without violating federal laws. It made me realize the value in my property had just doubled. So I sent Alex back an email, saying, "I need to get some professional advice before proceeding." He got defensive and said, "That's fine, but don't expect to make any more money. This is your last offer." Fine by me. I called up the company that handles conservation easements for the state. They confirmed it was irrevocable and could only be changed with their permission. That sealed the deal. When Alex got back to me after his discussion, he offered $185K down from the original $200K and said they'd pay $7.5K a year in rent indefinitely. I saw this as more of an insult than anything else. I wasn't selling my home, folks. My husband had fought for this land to preserve it. I told Alex that if he couldn't offer at least $240K with immediate payment and no rent afterward, they were welcome to do their worst. That's when the gloves came off. He got so mad, calling me a vindictive widow who had ruined everything for his client. I just hung up. Then the kicker. I found out that Alex was also representing the property management company on my late husband's old farm home, which is now owned by someone else. How convenient for him to know all this about both properties. So a few days later, I sent back an email with the offer of $240K in cash with no further payments and to take their legal battles elsewhere. Alex called me out again, trying to make it look like I was unreasonable. "Why do you need so much money? You won't find another farm like this one nearby," he argued. But that's when I decided to give him a taste of his own medicine. I contacted the original buyer of our home and informed them Alex was representing both sides, and my late husband had owned 60 acres himself, meaning we could potentially have used a split on both properties. That shook things up real quick. In the end, they came back with an offer for $235K plus closing costs if I got rid of this conservation easement. They didn't know it was irretrievable until Alex finally gave in and admitted he couldn't get any further out of me. The last line Alex said to me, "We could have had a deal, but your stubbornness cost you." And that's exactly what happened. I got my $240K with no rent, and I walked away knowing the value of standing up for what we worked hard to preserve. Let me know in the comments if you would have done the same. This was posted to our /petty revenge. I remember it so clearly. My Uncle Joe said with that smug tone of his over dinner 1 year ago, "Grandma's recipes are worthless." At 79, Grandma had finally self-published a cookbook containing her lifetime of culinary wisdom and secrets. The response was overwhelming. Within weeks, 14,000 copies sold out in the UK alone. Everyone who knew her was thrilled, including me. I texted my uncle back. Grandma's recipes aren't worthless. They've just caught on like wildfire. Joe rolled his eyes, that classic smirk crossing his lips. Oh, really? Prove it. I was taken aback by this challenge, but decided to take him up on it. That's when the idea hit me, a plan to show him I was right. First step, I got in touch with my friend Jake at the local cafe, where Grandma had been doing some cooking demonstrations. Jake told me that if she sold 50 pastries in 1 week, he could give them away for free. We set up the challenge on the cafe's social media pages, saying it was a celebration of our grandma's cookbook. Next step, I reached out to my cousin Lily at her bakery. She agreed to participate and let us know if she sold 250 cakes in 1 week. Then, we would publicly thank Grandma for her recipe inspiration. Finally, I contacted my friend Emma at the local grocery store where Grandma had been selling some of her produce. Emma was thrilled with the idea and promised to run a special promotion if we could get 100 vegetables sold that week. In return, she offered us an exclusive discount on all our future purchases, enough to buy 1 extra gallon of gas per month for each of our cars. The day before our challenge began, I messaged my uncle. Joe, the clock is ticking. He scoffed and said, I wouldn't worry about it. By next year at this time, that cookbook will probably be as relevant as a 1985 VCR. And then the fun started. Our first week was a whirlwind of activity. Grandma's pastries flew off the counter, literally. Jake reported 50 sales in just a couple of days. On social media, people clamored for more and asked when the cookbook would be back in stock. Grandma's cakes at Lily's bakery were flying too. By the end of the week, she had sold double what they normally did. The last challenge was Emma's veggie stall. By midweek, we had already surpassed our goal, 100 vegetables sold. But this time it wasn't just customers buying. People were coming to see Grandma herself. A local TV news crew even showed up one day for an interview. By the end of the week, the numbers were in. A total combined sales figure across Jake, Lily, and Emma's businesses was over 10,000 items sold. It felt like we had won not just Joe's challenge, but also silenced him completely. The next time I saw my uncle, he was visibly deflated. All right, he finally said. Perhaps your grandma does have a few good recipes after all. I laughed and replied, tell me about it. Joe sighed, clearly defeated. But that wasn't the end of our victory. Grandma's cookbook not only sold more, but also won several cooking awards in the UK and became an overnight sensation. When I texted Joe to share these achievements, he just chuckled. Guess I was wrong this time. The aftermath of my revenge was sweet and satisfying. More than that, it was about proving how true value can't be dismissed so easily. Let me know in the comments if you would have done the same. This was posted to our /malicious compliance. I remember the day like it was yesterday. My name is Sarah, and 6 months ago, things at work had turned sour in a big way. I worked as an engineer at Acme Tech Solutions, a mid-sized software company. We were developing a new financial management system for small businesses when something went terribly wrong. The night shift had been reporting issues with data corruption, but every time they contacted me or the IT department, we just brushed it off. They thought it was just a glitch, a minor annoyance that would get sorted out eventually. But those reports kept coming in, and I started noticing patterns too. Data discrepancies, slow system performance during late hours, and even occasional crashes. I tried reaching out to our own HR multiple times about this, but they were dismissive, saying it wasn't their concern. One morning, as I was walking down the hallway to my desk, I overheard a conversation between 2 managers in the break room. They were talking about cutting costs by reducing safety measures to hit project deadlines. That was the moment I realized I had to act. I couldn't believe our company would prioritize profits over people's safety. I started documenting every single issue and compiling emails and reports, but it felt like pushing a rock uphill. 6 months went by with nothing changing. Emails were ignored, issues left unresolved. It was disheartening, to say the least. Then one day, out of frustration and desperation, I made a decision. I would forward all 43 of those safety reports directly to the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA. I set up a time-stamped archive on my computer to keep track of everything, making sure each report was meticulously documented with dates, times, descriptions of incidents, and any relevant notes. It took hours, but I got every single one forwarded to OSHA along with copies of all our internal communications. The response from the company? Absolutely nothing. They continued as if nothing had changed, but I knew something would happen eventually. A week later, I received a call from OSHA. They were demanding an immediate investigation into these reports. The company was shocked. They couldn't deny it any longer. It was like a dam breaking. Suddenly, there was pressure everywhere. HR calling me to talk about safety protocols, IT re-examining our systems, and managers walking on eggshells. The next few weeks were chaotic. Acme Tech Solutions launched an internal investigation, but the outcome wasn't in my favor. The company tried to shift blame onto individual employees and even blamed some of these issues on user error, disregarding all evidence that pointed to their own negligence. But when OSHA got involved, everything changed. They issued a fine of $50,000 for safety violations and mandated extensive training for everyone in the organization. The company's reputation took a hit, losing several clients who couldn't trust them anymore. It wasn't just me. The whole team was vindicated. Everyone felt a sense of relief and empowerment knowing that we had done the right thing. In the end, I left Acme Tech Solutions after they failed to address their core issues. Now, as I sit here reflecting on what happened, it feels like a bittersweet victory. The payback wasn't just financial, it was psychological. Knowing that I stuck up for what's right, no matter how long it took, is more satisfying than any reward. Let me know in the comments if you would have done the same. This was posted to our /ProRevenge. For over a year, I felt like I didn't belong at family gatherings anymore because they were all talking about me behind my back. It started when Grandpa decided it was time to split our old house among us siblings and cousins. He announced it would be done equally, but everyone knew that wasn't how it was going to play out. The first hint came during a family dinner at the cabin last summer. I just heard mumbled voices in the background, something about my half of the upstairs. When I asked who they were talking about, Mom just said, "You silly. They're planning where your new room will be." At first, it was frustrating but bearable. But then things escalated. They started telling me everything. I would come home from work to find my parents in tears because you're always using the guest bathroom, or how the kids are always over and it's making a mess, as if they own the house already. So, I just kept nodding and smiling, pretending to be deaf, but secretly recording every single word. One day, at the annual family Christmas party, Uncle Bob blurted out, "We should probably move your stuff next week." And there it was, confirmation that they were planning this division in cold blood. From then on, I made sure my phone was always charged and ready to go at those meetings. I couldn't stand it anymore. I had seen enough of their scheming, heard how they thought they could just take what's mine without even giving me a heads up. So, when the day came, I surprised them all. I showed up early for the meeting with the lawyer my siblings and cousins were trying to set up without me. There was a gasp from everyone as soon as I walked in. Then, I casually said, "I heard about this discussion, guys. Thought it would be nice if we all knew what's going on." And then, the real fun began. The lawyer cleared his throat and went through the paperwork, but I had already pulled out my audio recordings. "Here are my logs from family meetings," I declared, holding up my phone. "This is everything you've said about dividing this property while I was still living here." Uncle Bob tried to deny it, mumbling something about just discussing the logistics. But there were no hiding behind fake smiles now. His eyes darted around as if searching for an ally who might speak up. The room was electric with tension. I leaned in closer, lowering my voice. "So, how does this division look? Because your plans are on tape and legal here." My eyes met theirs, one by one, watching their faces crumple. Dad had a mix of guilt and shame, while Cousin Sarah looked like she was about to cry. Finally, the lawyer interrupted with, "Well, we can still make adjustments if everyone is okay with it." I raised an eyebrow at him before turning back to my recording device. "Maybe you should be a little more transparent next time." Then, I said coolly. The family started murmuring amongst themselves again, and eventually, they agreed to rehash the plan in front of me. They tried to make amends, promising a fairer deal for me. But by that point, it was too late. They couldn't take back what had been recorded. The lawyers drew up revised contracts, but I felt satisfied knowing my house would be treated with respect from now on. Let me know in the comments if you would have done the same. And that is going to do it for today's episode of Reddit Untold. If you made it all the way to the end, you are exactly the kind of person this channel is for, so do me two last favors. Tap that like button, and hit subscribe so you do not miss the next batch. Drop a comment, and tell me which story was your favorite. and whether you would have had the nerve to do the same. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.
Do not believe me. Seriously, I did not believe the person who told me either, which is exactly why I'm asking for what comes next. Put one video on, let it run all the way to the end, and see whether the notification actually shows up. 10 minutes, nothing more. If it shows up, keep going. If it does not, delete the app and tell me I was wrong in the comments. It costs you nothing either way. To run that test, the pinned link sits at the top of the first comment. It is the one above all the others. And if you would rather not type anything at all, the code on the screen does the exact same job with your phone camera. Doubting this is free. Closing the video without testing it is what costs you, because that is another month of watching for nothing.